Sarah Martinez stood at the edge of the crowded beach, her dark sunglasses hiding eyes that had seen more than most people could imagine. The gentle California breeze carried the sound of children laughing and waves crashing, but her mind was elsewhere. 3 months ago, she had been deep in enemy territory, leading a classified operation that would never make the news. Now she was trying to blend into civilian life, working as a lifeguard at Manhattan Beach. The red swimsuit felt strange against her skin, so different from the tactical gear she had worn for 8 years as a Navy SEAL. Most people assumed female lifeguards were just college students earning summer money, and Sarah was content to let them think that. Her short blonde hair, athletic build, and easy smile made her appear like any other 28-year-old enjoying beach life. Nobody suspected that beneath her cheerful exterior lay the mind of one of the military's most elite operators. As she walked toward the lifeguard station, Sarah caught her reflection in a store window. The scars were hidden well under her uniform, but she could feel them. The long line across her shoulder blade from a knife fight in Syria, the circular mark on her ribs from a bullet that came too close in Afghanistan, the burn marks on her back from an explosion in Somalia that had saved 12 hostages but nearly cost her life. Each mark told a story of courage, sacrifice, and missions that officially never happened. The beach was unusually busy for a Tuesday morning. Families had claimed spots near the water. Surfers waited for better waves, and joggers moved along the packed sand. Sarah climbed into the tall lifeguard chair, her trained eyes automatically scanning for potential dangers. Old habits from her military service made her notice everything. The man reading a newspaper who kept glancing at his watch, the woman walking her dog who seemed more interested in the lifeguard stations than her pet, the teenagers whose laughter sounded forced. Her radio crackled to life. "Martinez, we've got a situation developing near Pier Section 7. Possible disturbance in the water." Sarah grabbed her binoculars and focused on the area. What she saw made her heart rate spike. 3 people were struggling in the water, but something about their movement seemed wrong. Her SEAL training kicked in as she analyzed the situation. This wasn't a simple drowning. The way they were positioned, the timing of their calls for help, the fact that they had appeared in a dangerous current area despite warning signs, it all felt like a setup. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Had her cover been blown? Were these people connected to one of her past missions? In the special operations world, enemies had long memories and patient plans. She had made powerful adversaries during her time with SEAL Team 6, people who would pay handsomely for revenge against the operative who had disrupted their plans and eliminated their allies. Despite her suspicions, Sarah couldn't ignore people in apparent distress. She grabbed her rescue equipment and dove into the water with practiced precision. As she swam toward the struggling figures, her senses remained on high alert. The water was rougher than expected, and the current was indeed dangerous. But Sarah had trained in conditions far worse than this. She had once swum 2 miles through freezing Arctic waters to reach an extraction point, and she had rescued wounded teammates while under enemy fire. As she reached the first person, a middle-aged man who appeared to be panicking, something felt off. His grip was too strong, his positioning too deliberate. Sarah's combat instincts screamed warnings as she approached. This was definitely not a random drowning incident. Someone had planned this carefully, using innocent-looking people to lure her into a vulnerable position in the water where her military training might be exposed or where she could be eliminated away from witnesses. The man grabbed her arm with surprising strength, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that confirmed her worst fears. He knew exactly who she was. Sarah realized that her quiet life as a beach lifeguard was about to end dramatically. The question was whether she could maintain her cover long enough to handle this threat without revealing her true identity to the dozens of beachgoers watching from the shore. Her hand moved instinctively toward where her sidearm would normally be, but of course lifeguards don't carry weapons in that moment. Treading water 30 yards from shore with a potential enemy agent gripping her arm, Sarah Martinez understood that her past had finally caught up with her. The peaceful months of saving swimmers and teaching water safety were over. She would need to rely on every skill she had learned in 8 years of the most dangerous military operations in the world, and she would have to do it while pretending to be nothing more than a dedicated lifeguard doing her job. Sarah's training took over as she assessed the situation in seconds. The man's grip was professional, designed to control rather than panic. She could break free easily, but doing so with the fluid efficiency of a Navy SEAL would blow her cover immediately. Instead, she played the role of a concerned lifeguard, speaking calmly while her mind calculated escape routes and threat assessments. "Sir, I need you to relax and let me help you," she said loudly enough for beach observers to hear, while her eyes searched for the other two people who had been in distress. They had vanished beneath the surface, which meant they were either genuine victims requiring immediate rescue, or they were positioning themselves for an underwater attack. Sarah's experience told her it was likely the latter. The man's response confirmed her suspicions. "We know who you are, Lieutenant Martinez," he whispered, using her former rank. "The families of those you killed in Kandahar send their regards." His accent carried hints of Eastern European origins, possibly mercenary rather than government-sponsored. That was both good and bad news. Mercenaries were often more brutal but less organized than state operatives. Sarah maintained her lifeguard persona while her body prepared for combat. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied convincingly. "Let me get you back to shore safely." But underwater she was already shifting her position, using legitimate rescue techniques that would give her tactical advantages if the situation escalated. Her legs moved in a pattern that appeared to be treading water, but actually positioned her to deliver devastating kicks if necessary. The first underwater attack came from her left side. Sarah sensed the movement and responded with what looked like an accidental collision, but was actually a perfectly timed defensive maneuver. Her elbow connected with the attacker's solar plexus, causing him to release a stream of bubbles and retreat temporarily. To anyone watching from shore, it appeared that she had accidentally bumped into another swimmer while focused on her rescue effort. "There are more people in trouble here," Sarah called toward the beach, hoping to bring additional lifeguards to the scene. Multiple responders would complicate the attacker's plan and provide her with backup, even if that backup didn't know they were entering a combat situation. She could hear the lifeguard station's emergency whistle blowing, which meant her colleagues were already mobilizing. The man still gripping her arm tightened his hold and produced something from his swimming shorts. Sarah caught the glint of metal and realized he had somehow concealed a knife in waterproof wrapping. The weapon was small but deadly, designed for close-quarters combat in water. This level of preparation meant the attack had been planned for weeks or months, with intelligence gathering about her routines and work schedule. Sarah made her decision. Maintaining her cover was no longer the priority. Survival was. She twisted in the water with lightning speed, using a move she had perfected during underwater combat training in the Navy. Her hand struck the man's wrist with precise force, causing him to drop the knife while appearing to struggle naturally in the water. The blade sank toward the ocean floor as Sarah repositioned herself defensively. The second attacker surfaced behind her, but Sarah was ready. Her peripheral vision had tracked his movement, and she spun to face him while maintaining her grip on the first man's arm. Not to save him anymore, but to use him as a shield and leverage point. The new threat was larger and more muscular, clearly the team's primary physical asset. "Help! Multiple people drowning," Sarah shouted toward shore, her voice carrying the urgency of a lifeguard facing an overwhelming emergency. This wasn't entirely false. The situation was indeed life-threatening, just not in the way observers might expect. Her call brought immediate response from the beach patrol, with additional lifeguards running toward the water and emergency services being contacted. The larger attacker moved with trained precision, but Sarah recognized his style from her military experience. He fought like Russian special forces, which meant these weren't random criminals seeking revenge. This was a professional operation, possibly contracted by someone with significant resources and connections to her classified missions. The implications of this realization sent a chill through her despite the warm California water. As the third attacker emerged from an unexpected angle, Sarah understood the full scope of their plan. They had positioned themselves in a triangle formation, cutting off her escape routes toward shore while maintaining the appearance of a water rescue emergency. Anyone watching from the beach would see a heroic lifeguard struggling to save multiple drowning victims, not a former Navy SEAL fighting for her life against trained assassins. The situation was about to escalate beyond anything she could explain away as a normal rescue operation. Sarah could see the backup lifeguards entering the water, unaware they were swimming into a combat zone. She had seconds to make a choice: reveal her true capabilities to neutralize the threat quickly, or continue the charade and risk civilian casualties when her colleagues reached the fight. The decision came naturally to Sarah as she watched her fellow lifeguards swimming toward what they believed was a rescue situation. She couldn't let innocent people get hurt because of her past. In one fluid motion, she executed a combat technique that would end the immediate threat while appearing accidental to distant observers. Her knee connected with the first attacker's diaphragm, causing him to sink beneath the surface while gasping for air. "Stay back. Dangerous current," she yelled to the approaching lifeguards using hand signals that indicated they should maintain distance. Her training partner Jake, a former college swimmer with good instincts, recognized the authority in her voice and held the others back. Sarah had always been respected for her water skills, so her colleagues trusted her judgment about ocean conditions. The larger attacker made his move. Lunging forward with a waterproof tactical knife that appeared in his hand like magic, Sarah twisted away, the blade slicing through the water inches from her ribs. Her counterattack was swift and professional, a palm strike to his throat followed by a joint manipulation that forced him to drop the weapon. To anyone watching from a distance, it looked like two people struggling against dangerous waves. But Sarah's biggest concern was the third attacker, who had remained submerged longer than humanly possible without breathing apparatus. This suggested military-grade underwater equipment, which meant the operation was even more sophisticated than she had initially assessed. Her eyes scanned the water's surface, looking for the telltale signs of a swimmer approaching from below. The attack came from directly beneath her. Hands grabbed her ankles and pulled downward with tremendous force, trying to drag her to a depth where she couldn't call for help or be seen by observers. Sarah's response was immediate and decisive. She dove downward willingly, surprising her attacker by swimming toward him instead of fighting to reach the surface. This gave her the tactical advantage of choosing the engagement distance and angle. Underwater, Sarah's training truly showed. She could hold her breath for nearly 4 minutes and fight effectively at depths that would disable most people. Her attacker was skilled but unprepared for her to voluntarily engage in underwater combat. Sarah's knife hand strike connected with nerve clusters she had memorized during military training, temporarily paralyzing his arm and forcing him to release specialized breathing equipment. As they wrestled 20 feet below the surface, Sarah realized the equipment was military grade, exactly what she would have used during underwater infiltration missions. This confirmed that her attackers had access to high-level military surplus or active military connections. The implications were staggering. Someone with government resources wanted her eliminated. Sarah's lungs began to burn, but she had been in worse situations. During a classified mission in the Black Sea, she had spent over 3 minutes underwater while extracting an intelligence asset from a heavily guarded submarine base. The key was remaining calm and using oxygen efficiently while fighting. Her opponent was becoming desperate, his movements growing erratic as his air supply dwindled. She surfaced strategically, choosing a position that blocked the view from shore, while appearing to be in the middle of a difficult rescue. Her attacker surfaced nearby, gasping and disoriented. Sarah immediately began what appeared to be mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, while actually applying pressure to nerve points that would keep him unconscious. To observers on the beach, she was saving a drowning victim's life. The first attacker had also resurfaced, floating face down but still breathing. Sarah's precise strike had been calculated to disable him temporarily, without causing permanent damage. She began towing both men toward shore, playing the role of a heroic lifeguard who had saved 2 lives despite overwhelming odds. The third attacker remained submerged, either unconscious or strategically retreating. As she neared the shallows where her colleagues waited with emergency equipment, Sarah's mind raced through the implications of what had just happened. Someone knew her real identity, her work schedule, her daily routines, and her combat capabilities. They had assembled a team of professional killers with military-grade equipment for a single assassination attempt disguised as a beach accident. The bigger question was, what would happen next? Professional operations like this were rarely one-time events. If this attempt failed, there would be others, and they would be better planned and more dangerous. Sarah's cover as a simple lifeguard was blown, which meant she needed to disappear again or face the threat directly. Neither option was appealing, but staying put would endanger her colleagues and innocent beachgoers. As her feet touched the sandy bottom, Sarah prepared for the performance of her life. She needed to convincingly play the role of a shaken but heroic lifeguard, while secretly assessing whether any of the emergency responders gathering on the beach might be part of the assassination plot. In the world of special operations, Enemies could be anywhere wearing any disguise, pretending to be anyone. The crowd gathering around the water's edge included paramedics, police officers, beach patrol supervisors, and curious civilians. Any of them could be hostile operators positioned to finish what the swimmers had started. Sarah's training told her to trust no one and prepare for anything. Her quiet life in California was definitely over, but the question was whether she would survive long enough to start another one. Sarah dragged the two unconscious attackers onto the beach, her body shaking from what appeared to be exhaustion but was actually controlled adrenaline management. She had learned during her SEAL training to channel combat stress into focused energy, rather than letting it overwhelm her system. The gathering crowd saw a dedicated lifeguard who had risked everything to save two drowning men, but Sarah's eyes were systematically cataloging every face, looking for threats. The paramedics rushed forward with equipment and questions, their professionalism immediately apparent. Sarah relaxed slightly as she recognized genuine medical personnel rather than disguised operatives. They were caught in a rip current, she explained breathlessly, sticking to a story that would satisfy investigators. The third person made it to shore on his own, I think. This lie would buy her time to figure out what had happened to the underwater attacker. As the medical team worked on her would-be assassins, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. One of the police officers taking statements had a distinctive tattoo visible beneath his rolled-up sleeve, a symbol she recognized from intelligence briefings about Eastern European criminal organizations. The same group she had disrupted during classified operations in the Balkans 3 years ago. "Ma'am, we need to get you checked out too," said a paramedic, approaching with a blanket and medical kit. "You've been through a traumatic experience and we should examine you for injuries." Sarah nodded, playing the role of a cooperative victim while her mind calculated escape routes. She couldn't refuse medical attention without raising suspicions, but being examined would reveal the scars that marked her as far more than a simple lifeguard. The examination took place in a beach patrol vehicle, away from the crowd but still visible to observers. Sarah positioned herself so she could watch both the medical activity and the police investigation through the windows. The paramedic, a kind woman named Lisa, began checking her vital signs and looking for injuries. "You're in remarkable shape," Lisa commented. "Your heart rate and breathing are incredibly controlled for someone who just fought those conditions." "I swim competitively," Sarah lied smoothly. "Long-distance ocean swimming builds endurance." This was partially true. She had been a competitive swimmer before joining the Navy, and her SEAL training had pushed those abilities far beyond civilian levels. But she couldn't explain the surgical precision of her movements in the water or the combat-ready state of her muscle memory. Lisa's examination revealed the edge of a scar on Sarah's shoulder, and her expression changed. "This looks like an old knife wound," she said carefully. "Do you mind if I ask how that happened?" Sarah's prepared cover story rolled off her tongue easily. Rock climbing accident a few years ago. Fell onto some sharp granite. The lie was believable because Sarah had indeed spent time rock climbing, though her scars came from significantly more dangerous activities. Through the vehicle's window, Sarah watched the police officer with the tattoo speaking quietly into his radio while looking directly at her location. His body language suggested he was reporting her position to someone else, which meant the assassination attempt wasn't over. The drowning incident had been Plan A, and Plan B was already being activated. Sarah's mind shifted into full combat mode as she realized she might have minutes before the next attack began. "Lisa, I need to use the restroom," Sarah said, interrupting the examination, "and I should probably call my family to let them know I'm okay." Both requests were reasonable and would give her mobility to assess the tactical situation. The paramedic agreed, pointing toward the beach facilities while mentioning that she should return for a more complete evaluation. Sarah walked casually toward the restrooms, her senses on maximum alert. The crowd was beginning to disperse as the immediate emergency ended, but several people remained who didn't belong. A woman reading a book hadn't turned a page in 10 minutes while maintaining visual contact with Sarah's movement. Two men discussing surfing conditions were positioned to block potential escape routes. A jogger had been stretching in the same spot far longer than necessary. Inside the restroom, Sarah quickly assessed her options. The building had 2 exits, small windows, and concrete walls that would provide decent cover but limited mobility. Her lifeguard uniform marked her as a target, but changing clothes would require time she might not have. Most importantly, she was completely unarmed except for her training and whatever improvised weapons she could create. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The Kandahar families remember Maria Volkov. Your debt will be paid today. The name Maria Volkov sent ice through her veins. During a classified mission to eliminate a human trafficking network, Sarah had killed a woman who turned out to be the daughter of a powerful crime boss. The woman had been armed and dangerous, but her death had apparently created a blood debt that someone was now collecting. The tactical situation was clear. Multiple hostiles, unknown weapons, civilian area with limited cover, no backup, and no equipment except what she could improvise. Sarah had been in worse situations during her military career, but never while trying to maintain a civilian identity. The next few minutes would determine whether she survived to see another sunset, or whether her body would be found on a California beach with no one ever knowing her true story. Sarah checked the restroom's window and confirmed it led to an alley behind the building. The glass was old and could be broken quietly with the right technique. Her escape route was viable, but running would only delay the inevitable. These people had found her once and would find her again unless she eliminated the threat completely. The question was whether she could do that without revealing her true identity to law enforcement and compromising other operations her former teammates might still be conducting. Sarah made her decision in the restroom mirror, seeing not the face of a lifeguard but the steely eyes of a Navy SEAL who had survived impossible odds. Running would only postpone this confrontation, and next time innocent people might be hurt. She needed to end this threat permanently, while maintaining enough of her cover to avoid federal investigation. The plan that formed in her mind was risky but achievable with her skill set. She quietly broke the window using her lifeguard whistle, wrapped in paper towels to muffle the sound, then slipped into the alley behind the beach facilities. Her bare feet moved silently across the concrete as she circled around to observe her watchers from an unexpected angle. The military training that taught her to become invisible in enemy territory served her well in the civilian environment. From her concealed position behind a maintenance shed, Sarah counted 6 hostiles positioned around the beach area. Their coordination was professional, with overlapping fields of observation and communication through earpieces. The tattooed police officer was clearly the leader, directing movements while maintaining his official cover. Sarah realized this was a well-funded operation with serious backing. Her first target was the fake jogger, isolated from the others and carrying what appeared to be a concealed weapon beneath his running shirt. Sarah approached from his blind side, using beach crowds and equipment as cover. When she struck, it was with the precision of someone who had eliminated sentries in hostile territory. A single pressure point attack rendered him unconscious, and she quickly searched his belongings. What she found confirmed her worst fears. Military-grade communication equipment, a ceramic knife designed to avoid metal detectors, and a photograph of her taken during her lifeguard duties. Most disturbing was a detailed floor plan of her apartment, complete with entry points and escape routes mapped out. They had been planning this assassination for months, studying her routines and preparing for multiple scenarios. The unconscious man's earpiece crackled with the tattooed officer's voice. Status report, all units. Sarah realized she had seconds before her attack was discovered. She quickly disabled the communication device and moved toward her next target, the woman pretending to read. The element of surprise was her greatest advantage, but it wouldn't last much longer. Sarah's approach to the woman was more challenging because of her position near families with children. Any violence had to appear accidental or be completely invisible to civilian witnesses. Sarah chose invisibility, moving through the crowd like a ghost while the woman focused on watching the restroom building. The strike was swift and appeared to be an accidental collision between 2 people, but the woman crumpled immediately from a precisely applied nerve attack. "We have 2 assets down," came the urgent radio transmission Sarah intercepted from the fallen woman's earpiece. "Target is mobile and dangerous. Switch to Protocol 7. Sarah didn't know what Protocol 7 meant, but the tone suggested it involved escalating to more direct and violent methods. Her window for subtle action was closing rapidly. The 2 men blocking escape routes were now actively searching for her, their casual disguises abandoned as they moved with obvious tactical purpose. Sarah realized they were herding her toward a specific location, probably where the tattooed officer waited with heavier weapons or backup. She decided to reverse their plan by moving toward the threat instead of away from it. Sarah's advance toward the police officer required crossing open beach terrain while avoiding the remaining hostiles. She used her lifeguard training for legitimate purposes, helping a child find his parents and assisting an elderly couple with their beach chairs, all while moving steadily toward her primary target. To observers, she appeared to be a dedicated lifeguard checking on beach safety after the earlier emergency. The tattooed officer was positioned near the lifeguard headquarters, where he could monitor radio communications and coordinate his team while maintaining his official cover. Sarah approached from an angle that put the building between her and his line of sight, using architectural features the same way she had used natural terrain during military operations in urban environments. As she rounded the corner of the building, Sarah came face to face with the officer, who was speaking quietly into his radio while watching the beach. His hand moved immediately toward his service weapon, but Sarah was faster. Her lifeguard training included dealing with aggressive individuals, and her military training had perfected those techniques into lethal precision. The struggle was brief and decisive. "Officers down! Officers down!" came panicked voices from multiple radios as Sarah's attack was witnessed by the remaining hostiles. The pretense of civilian operations was abandoned as the surviving assassins drew weapons and began moving toward her position with obvious hostile intent. Sarah realized the situation was about to become a public firefight unless she could end it quickly. From the officer's equipment, Sarah retrieved his service weapon and radio, giving her both firepower and intelligence about the enemy's remaining strength. The radio chatter revealed that backup units were en route, but Sarah couldn't determine if they were legitimate law enforcement or additional hostiles. Her window for resolving this quietly was measured in minutes before the entire beach became a combat zone. Sarah keyed the radio and spoke in the voice of someone accustomed to command authority. "All units, this is Martinez. I'm a federal agent conducting a classified operation. Clear the area immediately and maintain perimeter security." The lie bought her precious seconds as the remaining hostiles hesitated, unsure whether she was bluffing or if they had stumbled into a larger government operation they weren't briefed about. The hesitation from the remaining hostiles gave Sarah the tactical advantage she needed. She used the confusion to reposition herself in the lifeguard headquarters building, where she had access to emergency communications and a defensible position. Her federal agent bluff was working temporarily, but professional assassins would verify her claim quickly and realize she was operating alone. Through the building's windows, Sarah watched the two remaining attackers communicate with hand signals while trying to confirm her identity through their own channels. Their body language suggested they were receiving conflicting information, possibly because their handlers couldn't immediately determine whether a federal operation was actually in progress. This uncertainty was her greatest weapon at the moment. Sarah used the lifeguard station's emergency radio to contact actual law enforcement, reporting an officer down and requesting immediate backup. She carefully worded her report to suggest the fallen officer had been attacked by unknown assailants, avoiding any mention of her own involvement. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Multiple units were dispatched with estimated arrival time of 4 minutes. The approaching sirens changed everything. The remaining hostiles had to choose between completing their mission and escaping before legitimate law enforcement arrived. Through intercepted radio communications, Sarah heard their handlers ordering immediate extraction, suggesting the operation's sponsors weren't willing to risk exposure to official investigation. This was good news for Sarah's immediate survival, but bad news for her long-term security. One of the attackers made a desperate attempt to reach her position before backup arrived. Sarah watched him approach through tactical optics she had appropriated from the fallen officer, tracking his movement as he tried to use beach crowds for concealment. His technique was good but not exceptional, suggesting military training but not elite special operations experience. When he entered the building, Sarah was ready. The confrontation was brief and decisive, ending with another unconscious hostile and Sarah in possession of additional intelligence about the operation. His equipment included contact information for handlers, payment schedules, and most importantly, confirmation that this was a contracted assassination rather than a government-sponsored operation. The second attacker chose escape over engagement, disappearing into the crowd as police sirens grew louder. Sarah let him go, recognizing that pursuit would expose her to additional risks while providing minimal tactical advantage. She had eliminated the immediate threat and gained valuable intelligence about her enemies. The immediate battle was won, even if the larger war continued. Real police officers began arriving at the scene, their confusion evident as they tried to understand what had happened. Sarah quickly assumed the role of a helpful witness, explaining that she had found the injured officers while checking the building for additional drowning victims. Her lifeguard uniform and genuine credentials helped establish her credibility with the responding officers. "I heard fighting inside and came to investigate," she told the senior officer who arrived to take her statement. "When I found him unconscious, I secured his weapon to prevent it from being stolen and called for backup immediately." This version of events was technically accurate while omitting her actual role in the confrontation. The investigation that followed was thorough but routine. Sarah's story held up under questioning because it contained enough truth to be believable, and her lifeguard credentials established her as a trustworthy civilian rather than a potential suspect. The unconscious attackers were arrested and identified as foreign nationals with criminal records, supporting the theory that this was gang-related violence rather than terrorism. What concerned Sarah most was the efficiency with which the surviving attackers had disappeared. Professional extraction suggested significant resources and planning, which meant this assassination attempt was part of a larger criminal enterprise. The Maria Volkov connection implied Eastern European crime families with international reach and substantial financial backing. As the beach scene was secured and investigated, Sarah realized her cover as a simple lifeguard was probably intact, but definitely compromised. The people who had found her once would find her again, and next time they would be better prepared for her capabilities. Her options were limited: disappear completely and start over somewhere else, or stay and fight a shadow war against enemies who might never stop coming. The decision was made easier when she overheard radio traffic indicating that federal agencies were taking interest in the case. Multiple foreign nationals arrested at the same location suggested international criminal activity, which would trigger FBI investigation and possibly Homeland Security involvement. Sarah's military records were sealed, but determined federal investigators might eventually connect her true identity to the incident. Late that afternoon, as the beach returned to normal and the investigation wound down, Sarah made her choice. She would disappear again, but not before sending a message to whoever had ordered her death. The intelligence she had gathered would allow her to trace the operation back to its sources, and her SEAL training included techniques for eliminating threats proactively, rather than waiting for them to strike again. That night, Sarah began planning her counterattack while simultaneously preparing to abandon her California identity. The quiet life was over, but Lieutenant Sarah Martinez was about to remind her enemies why Navy SEALs were considered the world's most dangerous warriors. The people who had tried to kill her were about to learn that some debts could only be paid in blood. 2 weeks later, Sarah Martinez no longer existed. The woman who had been a lifeguard in California was now a memory, replaced by carefully constructed documentation that would satisfy casual investigation but disappear under serious scrutiny. Sarah had learned the art of reinvention during her military career, when deep cover operations required her to become someone else completely for months at a time. But before disappearing entirely, Sarah had used the intelligence gathered from her attackers to trace the assassination contract to its source. The trail led exactly where she had expected, back to Viktor Volkov, the crime boss whose daughter Maria she had killed during the Kandahar operation. What she hadn't expected was the scale of his organization and the extent of his reach into legitimate businesses and government agencies. Sarah's counterattack had been swift and surgical. Using skills learned in the most classified corners of military intelligence, she had systematically dismantled Volkov's operation from the shadows. Key lieutenants had disappeared or been arrested when anonymous tips led authorities to their criminal activities. Financial networks had been exposed to international law enforcement. Safe houses had been compromised and raided. The message she sent was clear: attempting to kill a Navy SEAL would cost more than any crime boss could afford to pay. But Sarah also understood that men like Volkov were driven by honor and revenge rather than rational cost-benefit analysis. Eliminating his organization wouldn't necessarily end his personal vendetta against her. The final confrontation came in Montenegro, where Volkov had retreated to a heavily fortified compound after his empire began collapsing. Sarah infiltrated the facility using techniques she had perfected during classified missions in similar terrain. The compound's security was impressive by criminal standards but inadequate against someone with her training and experience. She found Volkov in his study, an aging man surrounded by photos of his dead daughter and newspaper clippings about his destroyed organization. He looked up when she entered, showing no surprise at her presence. "So you have come to finish this personally," he said in accented English. "I wondered if you would have the courage." "Your daughter was armed and shooting at civilians when I killed her," Sarah replied calmly. "She made her choice, and you made yours when you sent assassins after me. This ends now, one way or another." The conversation that followed revealed the depth of a father's grief and the impossibility of reasoning with someone consumed by the need for revenge. Volkov's final attempt to kill Sarah was as futile as his hired assassins had been. Age and grief had dulled reflexes that might once have been dangerous, and Sarah's skills remained sharp from constant use. The confrontation ended quickly, with Volkov joining his daughter in whatever afterlife awaited criminals who had caused immeasurable suffering to innocent people. With Volkov dead and his organization scattered, Sarah finally felt safe enough to consider a permanent identity rather than constantly running. But she also realized that her military skills were too valuable to waste on civilian life, and too dangerous to ignore when evil people threatened innocent lives. The lifeguard who had saved drowning swimmers was gone, but the warrior who fought monsters in the shadows remained. 6 months after the beach incident, a new private security consultant appeared in Washington, D.C., specializing in protection for government officials and corporate executives facing international threats. Her credentials were impeccable, her skills were legendary among those who knew to ask, and her true identity remained carefully hidden behind layers of government classification. Alexandra Kane, as she was now known, operated from a small but sophisticated office near the Pentagon, where her proximity to military intelligence networks provided both legitimacy and access to information about emerging threats. Her client list included senators facing assassination attempts, tech executives targeted by foreign governments, and journalists investigating dangerous criminal organizations. What made Alexandra different from other security consultants was her willingness to take proactive action rather than simply providing defensive protection. When a client faced a credible threat, she didn't just increase their security detail, she eliminated the source of the threat permanently and quietly. Her methods were invisible to law enforcement but devastatingly effective against criminals and terrorists. The scars that had once marked her as a Navy SEAL now told a different story to the few people who saw them. She explained them as injuries from her work protecting clients in dangerous situations around the world. The knife wound across her shoulder blade became a story about defending a diplomat in Pakistan. The bullet scar on her ribs became evidence of stopping an assassination attempt in Colombia. But late at night, alone in her secure apartment, Sarah Martinez still existed in the shadows of Alexandra Kane's mind. She remembered the simple pleasure of saving swimmers in distress, the satisfaction of teaching water safety to children, and the peace of watching sunsets over the Pacific Ocean, without calculating threat vectors or escape routes. Sometimes she wondered what would have happened if Volkov's assassins had never found her on that California beach. Would she have been content to remain a lifeguard forever, using only a fraction of her abilities while living a normal life? The question was academic now, but it reminded her of the price she had paid for becoming one of the world's most dangerous women. The beach incident had taught her an important lesson about the impossibility of truly leaving her past behind. The skills that made her exceptional also made her a target for people seeking revenge or recognition. There would always be someone who knew her true identity, someone who wanted to test themselves against her reputation, or someone who blamed her for actions taken during classified operations. Alexandra Kane's business thrived because the world was full of dangerous people who threatened innocence for money, power, or ideology. Every successful mission reminded her that she had found her true calling, not as a lifeguard saving people from drowning, but as a guardian angel protecting them from human predators who were far more deadly than any ocean current. The woman who had once stripped off a lifeguard uniform to reveal scars from secret operations had finally stopped hiding from what those scars represented. She was a weapon forged by the United States military, and tempered by combat experience in the world's most dangerous places. That weapon could save a drowning swimmer or eliminate a terrorist cell with equal precision. As Alexandra Kane settled into her new life, she made peace with the truth that Sarah Martinez, the lifeguard, had been an illusion. The real Sarah Martinez was a Navy SEAL who happened to be very good at swimming, and now she was putting all of her skills to their proper use. The scars would always be there, but they no longer needed to be hidden. They were proof of service, sacrifice, and survival. Badges of honor worn by someone who had dedicated her life to protecting others from the darkness that most people never knew existed. The beach where it all began was thousands of miles away, but sometimes Alexandra could still hear the sound of waves and children's laughter. Those memories reminded her why her work mattered and why some people were willing to pay any price to keep the innocent safe from harm. She had found her purpose again, and this time, she wouldn't have to pretend to be someone else.